Late winter and early spring fishing can be tricky at the best of times. We all know that with the colder water temperatures and them being a cold-blooded creature, they don't have the need to eat as much as we would do as a warm-blooded creature. They can slow their metabolisms right down and adjust themselves accordingly, and they can go into quite a torpid state. Usually, sort of shallow venues would be the location where you try and eke out, sort of late winter, early spring fish. The reason why shallower waters tend to fish better is because they heat up quicker, and they also get hit with wind, and that roughs the water up and makes the carp move a little bit quicker. I don't really have that luxury living where I live. You have what you have and that's it. We don't have a myriad of waters that you can cherry pick. Now this lake I'm on it's not an easy water because of the depth of it. Now it's a big lake, it's about 37 acres. You've got depths around anywhere between 15 and 25, 35 feet. I wouldn't say these are positives because I don't like any predators on any lake, but this lake there's a good number of cormorants fishing the lake. Now there could be anywhere up to 20 cormorants on a good or a bad day. But these cormorants, they hunt in packs and they really know how to coordinate their attacks on the small little prey fish. But they do harass the smaller carp. Now, there are a number of big carp in here and a number of small carp, but they certainly do pressure the small carp. I don't think they do much to them. They might have a stab at them, but they're certainly not going to eat them once they get to sort of 5, 6, 7 pound. They might have a go, but I think in general the carp tend to survive it. But the carp don't like the predators. And even in the deepest part of winter, these fish have been pushed around and bullied around by these predators, these cormorants. And anyone who knows the metabolism of a carp, it does slow down a lot during the colder months, and it makes it that they don't need to eat as much. And the more they're pushed around and the more they move, the more they have to feed. So the cormorants on here are probably doing us a little bit of a favour in that they're getting these carp a little bit more awake quicker. Because as I say, it's such a deep lake, it could take a long time for them to heat up and warm up and get moving and feeding. It depends on who you talk to about when spring actually starts. There is the meteorological start date of March the 1st, which is, officially spring. But, I've been reminded by a couple of people that, nature doesn't work off a calendar or a time on a clock. It works off when it wants to start up. And, you only have to look around you. There are certain signs that spring is here. The crocuses are out, the toads and the frogs are beginning to spawn in the puddles behind the lake. But that doesn't make it any easier, and especially on a deep lake, there's not going to be that hit of real warming up of the water. It's, take for today, for instance, we've got really high pressure. I arrived here on Thursday, it's now Sunday. When I arrived on Thursday, it was about 10:38, which is a fairly high pressure, and it's hovered around that up to about maybe 10:40 for the last couple of days, and it hasn't really changed. High pressure fishing is never going to be fantastic. I don't particularly like really low pressure fishing either. I've never found it really conducive to catching, but that's just my opinion. And I know that goes against a lot of the ethos of other carp anglers who just love low pressures. I like something that's a little bit more Goldilocks, something that's a little bit more in the middle. Today has been a bit of a nothing day. There's been literally no real ripple on the water. It's been flat calm, and there's been this haze, this high pressure haze that it's like a fog, it's like a mist, but it's not. It's just like as if everything's slightly out of focus. If you're an angler who fishes in these conditions, you know exactly what I mean. And it's not really conducive to catching. Now, when I arrived on Thursday, the sun came out, it was absolutely glorious setting up, and it actually was warm. I could have nearly got down into a t-shirt, it was that warm. But ever since then, cloud cover has come in, and it's been cool and damp, and it's really that kind of temperature and that weather condition that really gets into your bones and makes you like cold from the center out. I'm fishing at this island out here, which is right over close to the far bank. It's about 135, 140 yards out to the actual spot I'm fishing. I could cast it at a push on a good day, but I'm using a bait boat to actually drop out my baits. I arrived on Thursday. Thursday night I managed my first fish of the trip, which happened to be about an 8-pound bream, just knocking on to 8 pound. And then yesterday, in the middle of the day, it was about 2:30 actually, and that seems to be the feeding spell here at the moment, about sort of anywhere between 1 o'clock in the afternoon and 3. You want to be on your rods around that time. A lot of anglers tend to disappear at peak feeding times, and you need to stick with your rods when you do know it's a certain feeding time. But I managed to catch my first fish of the year, which is always notable, regardless of size. It happened to be a 6-pound 4-ounce. I weighed it for, just to make a mental note for myself that was my first fish of 21. I was caught actually on the Code boilie. I was using a pop-up on the runny rig. It was my first fish on that particular, final version of the bait. We've field tested Code for the last 3 years in different variations and guises, testing out base mixes, flavour combinations, and it's amazing being involved in that testing phase and the initial, bringing those ingredients together. To see what we were using 3 years ago until the final version of Code, which bears no resemblance, and yet it does. It's just an incredible journey, and it's a real joy to be using a bait that I have had a little hand in. And I say a little hand in, all I did was just test the batches that the lads sent me, but the real work was done in-house, where they were, tweaking and buying in the best of ingredients and, manipulating bits and pieces. And the real key factor of Code, and what makes it really stand out, it's not a non-fish meal bait, is that it's got an active enzyme package both in the bait and in the activator liquid. And it really starts a reaction within the bait that when it's in water and it's sitting there, it is actively doing something chemically that the fish find interesting, and they find very appealing, and it stimulates them. There's been a lot of claims over the years of active baits that, in reality bore no resemblance to the bait itself, because it wasn't active at all. But this is truly an enzyme active bait, which in fishing terms is kind of like a bit of the holy grail. And it's certainly going to stand its test of time. It's going to join the ranks of Trigger and Big Fish Mix, rightly so, because this Code is going to be outstanding. The Code is such an incredible flavour and smell, and it's so unique. Now, I know what makes the flavour up, because it's blended in-house, and I know the components go in it, and when it's fused together, it just becomes its own smell. It's very unique, and as I say, it's a really old school back note to it, and it's just so lush. It's a really lovely flavour. Now, how I've been fishing it with my bait boat. I mean, as I said, it's a bit of a long distance over there to the island, and I want to keep the baiting very tight, so casting is out. I've got a bait boat with me, and I'm going to use it. So I've been literally using a PVA bag. Most people wouldn't put a PVA bag in a bait boat, but I've been doing that purely because it's such a bit, deep piece of water over there. I'm fishing in 20-25 foot of water. If I just put it in the hopper, on its descent out into the, from the hopper, it would actually cone out, and with all the undertow as well, and the lighter pieces of bait that I've got mixed in my mix, it could spread out too far, and I don't want that to happen. I want it to more concentrate. So what I've been doing is fishing a big PVA bag with my hook bait clipped on. I've been sending the boat out to keep the bait nice and tight to the spot. And I'm not overfeeding it. I'm giving it just enough food, maybe for 1 or 2 mouthfuls, and hoping that by fishing the pop-up just above everything, it may be the one thing that goes first. Now, the mix that I've made up is a real simple one, and I want it to be really active, but I want it to be, very small bits of food rather than, larger pieces. So what I've done is I crushed up some boilies into my Ridge Monkey crusher, and then I emptied it back out and put it back a second time and crushed it again, so it's really fine pieces. I put in a tiny bit of the PVA bag and stick mix into the mix, and I've put in some code pellets, 8mm, and some maggots. Now the maggots I'm using, maggots are a great bait for this time of year. It really does help get the fish home in on the spot quicker. I'm using them straight out the freezer dead, and when I take them out the freezer, I'm putting in a small bit of the code activator, about 3 to 5mm, and then shaking the bag around and letting that soak into the flesh of the maggots. Maggots are going in then to the actual pellet and crumb mix, and that's all I'm using. That's filling up in the PVA bags, and it's also going into the hopper. And the Ronnie rig I'm using is a simple 15mm code. I usually tie them on with floss onto a little swivel rather than using a screw. As I tie down the first knot, I then let the tags out of the bait floss, and I thread some maggots on. These are live ones, which I always bring a little separate box of live maggots, and I use the live maggots actually on top. And I create a little bit of a Medusa rig. So they're just threaded onto the bait floss and then tied off. Real simple. And the reason why I'm doing that, it's like tipping your pop-up in corn or something like that. It's trying to make it like a little target, a visual that the fish will come in on and will just instinctively grab first. And because it's slightly popped up above the main bait, it may just stand out enough for them to pick it up, being the first thing. I don't really want to feed the fish. I just want them to come in and pick up my hook bait before anything else. And that's how I would normally approach this time of year, right through until the end of March. Once we get into April, things start to change a bit, and I adjust my baiting up, and I'll start increasing the amount of food I'm putting out, and I'll start making a little area of feed rather than fishing very small, tight areas. But it's a scratching time of year. It's a very difficult time of year, and it's really hard to put carp on the bank on venues like this. It's just great to be out as well, though,